Your Crisis Coach with Scott H. Silverman and Fred Carroll. An addiction recovery and mental wellness discussion. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Your Crisis Coach with Scott H. Silverman, the bald guy, because Dad has hair, and me with the hat on. We're bringing a guest, but we're not going to talk to him yet. We're going to see how we made a bet with Dad to see how long he could stay quiet without interrupting and interjecting. So we're going to see if Dad could play this game with us. But how are you today, Mr. Scott H. Silverman?
I'm well, Fred. I'm excited about our guest. You know, he's like a brother from another mother, and it's the first time he's done this. So we're going to do what we can to make him feel as uncomfortable as we can and get to his truth. So Fred, let me ask you. You know, we're in the first week of March, and we've seen a lot of excitement at federal level the last week. What stands out for you in the last week that you think you'd like to share?
Well, a lot of it comes down. So some of the things is because I've found myself distancing myself from things. So now I don't even understand when things are happening because I'm not in the in anymore. But beyond that, obviously, I could see the argument that happened on camera. I was watching that live while I was at work, pretending to work. They don't listen to my show, so they won't know that. But, you know, it was alarming. And like I was telling you before, I still stand on the fence that I don't disagree with every single idea that he's pushing. For instance, I'm all for finding government waste, but I don't like the way they're doing it. So I want them to find the government waste, but I don't like the way they're doing it. I agree with some of the legalization of persons that came over illegally and stuff. But once again, I don't like the implementation of the plan. I don't mind the plan, and I get the law is the law, but I'd prefer if it was done in a different way. So I don't know if that's me being selfish, me being compassionate, or a combination of everything, or wanting my cake and eat it too. It's confusing sometimes. I am a very middle ground guy who happens to lean left, and I don't care about money as much as I care about people. But it was alarming because the only thing, what was alarming about it, beyond what they were talking about and how important a deal is in all this, I was more alarmed at how unpresidential. And this is also on Zelensky also. I think he acted out of line also, considering what we're talking about here. And it all comes down to money. I'm so tired of money, minerals, and Russia. Money, minerals, Russia. When children are dying, when people are being harmed, it's bigger than just money, in my opinion. So does that answer kind of did I skate over the line?
No, I think you danced on it really well.
Thank you.
So since you chimed in on that, I want to point something out, and then we're going to get to chat. I found out that, which I'm real excited about, that Trump has done, and I'm not a fan, but his pressure on the border is causing major chaos right now with the cartels around fentanyl and the precursors that are manufactured. We've talked about this for years in China. And they're concerned because if he gets the green light from the Mexican president to bring the whatever powers to be, you know, Delta or the SEAL teams, or, you know, just military in general across the border, that's a big problem for the cartels, because America will come with the appropriate resources to combat them. And the cartels have always felt like, you know, they're their own army. So I'm real excited about that. And I talked to a really good source today that said that they're waiting right now to see what happens, because they're concerned, and they don't want their operation interrupted, because they've got a huge mass distribution center globally. So I'm excited about that. But I agree with you. I think, look, Trump hasn't done real well, in my opinion, sustaining businesses, but he has started a lot, which means he's got a lot of guts. He's got a lot of know-how. sin abilities are weird, and the way he goes about things, I don't agree with, and the fact that Zelensky's now or Ukraine's the bad guy, and they're claiming that they started the war, and more than 2/3 of the Republicans agreed for years that it was Russia that started that, and they've all decided to say nothing and step behind the shadow of Trump, and that bothers me because that's a power. I want to stay in office, I want to get reelected. It used to be people before politics. So let's shift over to people today, because I have that's our guest today, and that's one of those guys that the way I like to put it is he doesn't work for God yet because he's still on the planet, but when the time comes and he's called, he's going to get a seat at the table. And I admire that about the guy, and I love the guy, and I think his heart is so big. And we don't always have people here on the program who look at life the way he does, and he gets up in the morning and he gives something to everybody else. And I think when he goes to bed at night, he gives something to everybody else as well. So he's a real giving guy, and we probably could spend 3 hours with him, but I'm ADHD, and I'm going to pass out after about 25 minutes.
Hey, Thad, that's big from him, because either you got pictures of him breaking the law and he's really buttering you up, but it sounds like it's more than that. This is a bromance. This is a true bromance. How are you, Thad?
I'm good, Fred. Thanks for having me on.
No problem.
I think it really goes to the fact that Scott inadvertently calls me Chad most of the time. And I give him grace for that.
Yeah, well, you have to. He's not. Me and Scott have. How boring of a name is Fred and Scott? There's millions of us, and no more coming. Nobody's naming their kid Fred. When's the last time you met a baby and said, "What's his name?" Fred. That just doesn't happen anymore. Nobody's naming. But Thaddeus, are you a Thaddeus?
No, I'm a just Thad off of Gunsmoke.
Wow, just that. That's even bigger. That's even better. That's an opening line to a film right there. So tell me why you're here. You got 3 minutes. Start at birth and get to now. Go.
Giddy up. I am here because I have developed a friendship, I believe, with Scott Silverman, and in the recovery circles. And we share a home group in recovery, Harmony Group in Ocean Beach, California. I took kind of a long path to get to Alcoholics Anonymous. I started drinking as a teen. Tell a little bit of it later on, but as a sophomore in college, I did an English paper on adult children of alcoholics. My dad was what I could call a heavy drinker. I can't call him an alcoholic because I'm not him. But it really opened my eyes to what my drinking was as a 21-year-old. And it took 30 more years of progressively drinking before it got bad enough to do something about what my drinking had become in my life. And it wasn't an easy path to go through, but once I found Alcoholics Anonymous, it gave me a direction to go. And I've really enjoyed the journey that I've been on these last 6.5 years.
That's amazing. Yeah. So a couple things there. One, you write this paper. Do you consider yourself an alcoholic at this point when you write the paper?
Well, it's right in front of me of what my activities were that I probably am, but I wasn't ready to admit that. I think for a few months after writing the paper, I remember scaling back some, and I had surrounded myself with heavy drinkers like myself, and family, friends, and so drinking was just part of life. And as I went through those next 30 years, I didn't know how to function without that alcohol around me.
So, and the second thing is you said something interesting, how, and I just wanted to break it down. I've never heard somebody say you can't call him an alcoholic because you're not him. What did you mean by that?
I learned that in Alcoholics Anonymous is I can only determine if I'm an alcoholic, because by going through the doctor's opinion of the big books of Alcoholics Anonymous, it tells me kind of what an alcoholic is. So I can call myself that.
So it's personal. It's a personal responsibility.
Personal responsibility.
Yeah, it was just interesting. You're the first person that ever said that here on the show, and I've talked now to hundreds, I guess, and nobody's ever said it that way. So I was wondering if that was your personal opinion or something you learned.
It's something I learned, and my dad died about 1.5 years ago of the disease of alcoholism.
Yeah.
But I still can't call him an alcoholic legally, right, Scott?
Well, the principles talk about that. What's interesting also is the principles even say that I can't really say it in public because it might scare somebody or offend somebody or cause someone uncomfortability. And the reason we don't call each other alcoholics is because we don't want to breach their anonymity. I mean, I'm very public about it and have been for a long time, but I certainly respect and honor people's boundaries around that because, and some people are really open to letting everybody know to the point they may wear a sign on their head, especially the first 90 days, 6 months. So many people I know that have gotten sober, first thing they want to do is become a therapist. I want to help others. Well, wait a minute. You still can't tie your shoes in the dark. So let's wait a couple more weeks and then apply.
Scott, why do you continue even after recovery to call yourself alcoholics? And I'll use an example of somebody. If somebody's overweight and loses weight, they don't still call themselves heavy or fat. Why would an alcoholic who recovers still call themselves an alcoholic?
Thad, I'm going to give that one to you because you
got it. I'm ready for it.
Go ahead.
I have a disease called alcoholism, and it's allergy of the body. It's an obsession of the mind, is what I've been taught. And by being in recovery and continuing that journey of recovery, I can arrest that. I can keep it at bay. But because I am an alcoholic, I have this disease, just like if you're a diabetic. If you're a diabetic and you're doing all the things you're supposed to be, you're still a diabetic, right? Yeah. Well, I'm an alcoholic. No matter what I do, I have that disease living in me. And so for me, I have made the choice to not pick up the first drink, because the first drink leads to many more, and I don't want to go down that path.
Yeah, and I asked these questions. I don't know if you're aware. I am not an addict or a recovering addict. So that's why I don't have the answers to these questions. But it's interesting the way they just all are coming out today, in that just the way my brain works. I hear it and then I'm thinking, well, heavy people don't call themselves heavy after they've recovered from being heavy, So it is interesting because I could agree and I could nitpick it to death probably, because I could say a person with cancer, a legitimate disease, once they're cured of cancer, they don't go around saying they have cancer, but I understand because it's a personal, you're talking from more of a personal journey of responsibility too. It's got to help more than it hurts to continue that, to believe that, just so you can get to tomorrow without having a drink. Just a reminder almost.
I think your point, Fred's well taken. It's like, somebody who quits smoking, somebody who quits, eating or overeating, or, stops their domestic violence. They don't introduce themselves that way. And I think part of the history of the Fellowship of Recovery is, and to your point though, when cancer survivors are in rooms together, with their sisters and brothers, they generally will introduce themselves as a cancer survivor. And
Right.
so will people who have suffered from issues when they're together in their fellowship in a quiet hall. So I think there's probably more of a technical reason, but what I've learned, which is interesting over the years, that, I introduce myself, as an addict, alcoholic, anytime I'm at a meeting. When I go to Rotary and I talk about, drug addiction and accessing treatment and family trauma, I don't introduce myself. Sometimes I do jokingly, but I don't do that. And I've heard from some of the experts that when you stand up and you continually say out loud that you are an alcoholic or an addict, that's a bad thing. That's a negative reinforcement that goes on. But I find it as a reminder, because with this disease that I have, alcohol is, I have jails, institutions, or death. Those are my options, or sobriety. And cancer, it comes to people. Most people aren't born with it. I was born with this disease. Cigarette addiction doesn't come when you're born. So it is kind of unique in that respect. And it's the only maladaptive behavior that if you go to get help and people don't think you're ready at the other side of the counter, they'll tell you to come back. They would never do that with a cancer victim. They would never do that with someone with diabetes. But with this, because of the stigma, because most people who don't understand the disease will say, "Hey, Scott, why don't you just stop drinking?"
Yeah, it's also the stigma, and it's also an accepted stigma in the sense of, if you came to me and told me you were addicted to crack versus addicted to alcohol, I'd be more apt to talk to somebody addicted to alcohol than the crack. But an addiction is an addiction. So it's so acceptable in the American, well, universally, internationally.
Yeah.
Alcohol is not crack. It's not heroin, but it is.
Well, it's a mood altering substance that people self anesthetize themselves with, and they use it to, self medicate. I should point out that Fred does like to say that he's not an alcoholic, but he does have a few untreated issues that I'm hoping over time that the intervention will come down, and we'll move him along. But he is practicing self-care. Fred, would you mind sharing what you just shared with me that you're doing now, that you're going to do once a week, that you feel good about?
No, once a month.
Oh, once a month. I'm sorry.
Because I'm so involved in my work and stuff, and just, the typical home life and all that. And I don't get out enough. So I made a deal with myself that I will go to New York City, which is not too far from me, at least once every 4 to 6 weeks, depending on finances, of course, but just to go out, because it's not expensive. It's not a costly thing for me. Even if I didn't do anything, just to take a train is $35 round trip. It could be a bag lunch. I could bring lunch with me and sit in the park, for the day. It's just about getting out and seeing things. So yeah, I guess that's self-care, right?
I think it's great. You're almost there. Another year or two, we might even get you into some form of working with.
I'm a little tougher. I'm on the East Coast, where we don't live the plush life of you Californians.
Oh God!
Where you get to sit in the 70-degree sun all day long, as we're freezing and it's 18 degrees right now. But I'm built for it. You guys are a little less built for the struggle.
Come on, I go to a virtual meeting, and when I really got to know Thad a lot, he was on his little boat. I don't know if it was a river or on a lake, and he'd be on the lake in the water with his hat on, and he'd be, experiencing the meeting virtually on the watered boat, and because he's up in the Northwest. So virtual to me has been a path to give so many more people a chance, get access to help and support.
Yeah, it is great. So back to Thad, and I won't call you Chad because I've got a memory, and I know your name is Thad. And
I appreciate that, Fred.
Tell me what you do. Well, give me some more back information. Are you married? Do you have children? What do you do for a living? Give me some back life?
I am married, 34 years to the same woman. I have a son that's 30, just turned 33, and a daughter that's 31. They both live here in Spokane, Washington, where I grew up and live. My son has a 18-month-old daughter. It's my granddaughter, and my daughter has a 2.5-year-old and a 17-month-old. So I have
Wow.
3 little granddaughters that I've been blessed with.
Spoil.
And it's pretty awesome. And the river that Scott was talking about, I own some recreation property on the Ponderay River, which is up near the Canadian border in northeast Washington state. And we've had a place up there for about 20 years, and lots of great recreation activity up there for our family. And it was a place that I experienced a lot of drinking also.
Right.
And that being surrounded with people that drank like me, including my wife. And that's been a big challenge in my sobriety is me making that change and what my expectations of her changing should be or could be or will be. And so that's been a challenge. I'll get back to that in a second, but further about me, I have owned a contracting business for 20 years now and specialize in patio covers, awnings, steel RV structures.
Oh, I know a lot about that. It's what I do for a living. I'm into lumber sales.
Okay, all right.
I work for USLBM,
Okay.
and we own about 400 lumber yards across the United States.
Nice.
And yeah, I've been in construction for a while. So what's interesting about even the similarities you have, Scott, you have one that's glaringly different than Scott is. You've only been sober 6 years, correct?
That is correct.
So Scott's been sober for what, 40 now?
39, right?
40.
40. He hit 40.
November, yeah.
So Scott's children were born as he was sober. Your children saw you as an alcoholic.
They did. Yep.
And I asked Scott this once about how he views his children drinking. How do you view your children drinking?
My son has the potential of going my direction. He drinks like I did when I was at that age. Goes out with his buddies, has beers at games, and has a lot of fun. And drinking is part of that. And that's how it was for me at that age. Mm-hmm. And I believe, and also he's my business partner now too. And so I see him on a daily basis, and I can see when he's had too many the night before. I can smell it on him. And that's a challenge for sure.
And when you see that in your head, when you want to say something because you did it, what is that process like? Because you obviously experience that. By the way, when you talk about drinking up in the lake, I mean, just sounds peaceful. I was always in the city of San Diego and different places, unless I was home. But how does that feel? And what do you think about? Because, you don't want to say, oh, I see his future, but in some ways you do, because this is a family disease, and there's they say it's hereditary. Sometimes it skips a generation. Sometimes it pops up late. Sometimes it doesn't pop up at all. And some people can drink a lot. I don't know many who do, because I never hung out with them, and they don't have the issue, but they can stop at a couple of this. I never could. So what's that feel like for you when he comes in the office in the morning and do you say to yourself, gosh, I'm jealous, or I want to say this, but I better not, or what do you
more of that last part, Scott. I want to say something, but I better not. And I have to kind of let him take his own path. I've had a few conversations with him, though, over the last couple of years of, hey, I'm aware of what's going on with you. And you should be aware of it as well, that this is a family disease, that my dad had this alcoholism, that my grandfather drank quite a bit, that his father, my great-grandfather, it was rampant throughout the family. So I've had that conversation of, hey, this is a hereditary thing, and you've got it, bud. I don't want to, and it's just that. It's a fact. And
it's difficult. I could see the difficulty in it. How
it really is, because I really love my kid, and I don't want him to struggle, get to the point of the alcohol becoming an issue in his life like it was for me.
Right. You
because
really
right now
can't
it's
even,
a lot of fun.
you can't even say, technically, I mean, you could say it, of course, but you really can't say it and have any conviction behind it. Say, well, he has a kid now, maybe now's when he'll straighten out. Well, you didn't.
Exactly.
You know, so it's hard, and I understand this. This is like me lighting a cigarette, telling my kids not to smoke. It's one of those things that even though we know and this is no, just so people know, this is no conviction against your son or anything, and we're not saying anything negative towards him. But it's a struggle. Raising kids is hard enough. Now you're adding in a whole element because it kind of reminds me of my father being so religious. My father is a very religious man. I personally am an atheist, personally. That struggle is there. But technically, I'm an atheist because of him being so religious. It's a weird dynamic that parents have with their children, but he doesn't even realize how much he affected my decisions.
Yeah. And I mean, my dad was a smoker. And that was part of why he died also. And I swore I would never smoke, which I didn't, but I didn't think what he was doing with alcohol was bad enough where it would hurt me if I followed suit.
Right.
And
plus, you probably thought you could just stop if you didn't want to.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And then
everyone
as
does.
the relationship furthers, I mean, once my son got to the point where he started drinking, we would drink together, just like my dad and I would drink together. And
Right.
so...
And now it's hard to be the tough guy.
Sure, yeah.
You told him it was okay. You basically told him it was okay.
Right.
And now you're going to tell him it's not? Which is it? You know,
Yeah.
I know. I feel that pain. That's an internal struggle, and it must just rack your brain at times.
So that I've seen you, at meetings, you have your granddaughter in your lap, and remember that one day I said, "Why are you smiling?" So my wife just walked by. I won't go into what she did, but your kids have to see how immersed you are, I would assume, in the program of recovery.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So,
and they know how important it is to me, and how much of my life has changed because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah, the way you talk, the way you listen, the way you become part of, and your family dynamics, because you've been in the program a period of time where your kids, well, they were in their late 20s before they saw you get sober. So they've seen the transition and transformation. My sense is they must have, the thoughts in their head, and having that in front of them could be a tremendous safety net, or, pivot point that they realize that, it's good to see. We have Dad here now. I mean, because if they saw you at your worst time, which means they probably know the difference. Which that doesn't happen.
Are they respectful to your decision?
Oh, 100%. I mean, at the end of my drinking, I had gotten into such a depression that they were both of them and my wife were worried about me,
Yeah.
the condition I was in mentally. And I mean, my daughter is the one that kind of kicked this process into gear. She said, Dad, she was going to University of San Diego nursing school. And she said, Dad, you should go see a doctor and be honest about how you're feeling. And summer of 2018, I felt bad enough where I agreed to do that. And I walked into that doctor's office. They gave me the alcohol questionnaire. And I was in the 90th percentile, 18 out of 20 right on that, baby.
Winner, chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that started the process. But so, yes, I mean, my kids have seen me at what alcohol did to me, and they've seen what recovery has done for me. And they're
It is.
very
It's such a
supportive.
struggle. Such a
Yeah.
struggle. I can't, like I told you, because I've never gone through that portion of life. Luckily, I guess, or on my own conviction, I still understand I could put it into another thing that I did do wrong or right, whether it was work. I was addicted to work, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
All I did was work. That's an addiction in its own way, but I took a lot away from my children's lives. I also gave a lot to their lives by going to work, but I took more away by not being there. And work was my alcohol or whatever. So it is. I definitely have compassion for you because the struggle has to be so overwhelming at times of how to answer a question, how to respond to something. And it just is. Now, do you find yourself ever around alcohol?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Quite a bit. Up until within the last almost 9 months now, my wife still drank quite a bit. And I still have lots of family that drinks quite a bit that I'm around. And there's nothing about it that entices me. There's nothing about it that challenges me to want to do that anymore.
Do your kids drink around you as well? When you guys socialize, have barbecue, they're drinking, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're drinking. Yeah. Yeah.
I did
And
read.
so-
I was reading Stephen King's story about his alcoholism, and he has an interesting thing. The one thing that still drives him crazy to this day, and he's been sober for a while, when he walks by a table, like they're cleaning the table up, the people that work there, and there's a beer that's only half drank. He says it drives him insane as an alcoholic because he used to have to pour his full beers down the drain. Like his wife would buy him a 12-pack of the tall boys. If he only drank 11, he had to pour that 12th one down the drain. Otherwise, it would call his name all night long in his sleep. And he can't understand why somebody would ever, in his mind, as an alcoholic, why somebody would even drink a beer but not finish a beer. Right. What's the point? Why not just get water?
Yeah. What does bother me, and it's when personalities change due to the drinking, and then I go in with an exit strategy. If I'm not comfortable in the situation anymore, I leave. And that's because I can't control what people's behavior becomes when they're drinking. And I'm sure mine did too. And so, as opposed to just sitting around getting more and more pissed off, I'll say, hey, it's time. Good night. It's time for me to go. Or even when we're all up at the river place, I'll go to bed early. Or I'll go in and read.
Do you have the ability, Scott, to be around alcohol?
I answer that with sure. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. But one of the things I don't do, just out of habit, I don't go to environments where there's a lot of drinking going on. Because I go out to eat, take Michelle out, and we go to places, and most restaurants have bars. But, even if there's no seats in the place and there isn't a bar, if I'm really hungry, I'll sit there. But normally I won't go in there because that's the bar, just because I'm not comfortable there, or I don't want to be uncomfortable, and I don't like, look, I know the behavior of people that drink too much, and I learned to hate it. And once I started to look in the mirror, and the reflective thinking that I learned in meetings, and when people describe their behavior, thinking, oh my God, because I would be invisible in my own head when I was at a bar. I mean, I used to go to happy hour. That was my favorite time because everybody was getting 2-for-1s and slamming them down. So I felt like I was part of, and I never liked, the holidays because everybody, or you could kind of blend in during the holidays, but it was a different time for me. And I drank a lot away from big crowds. Although, I remember my wife making a list on Sundays. You need to call these people and apologize. And I said, why? She said, well, what you did last night. I said, I don't remember. Why would I have to apologize?
Give me an example of what you're saying. What would have you done? And you don't have to tell me the worst thing, but give me an example, what you did.
Okay. Well, one trip, we went on a bus for some friend's anniversary, there was a wedding anniversary. We got on a bus. We went down to Tijuana. I was shit-faced before I got on the bus. This is 4:00 in the afternoon because I knew I was going to Tijuana, and I love, Mexico and drinking. I don't go there anymore because I just, nearly got shot and killed in Puerto Vallarta and didn't have great experiences. Kicked off a cruise ship. But when we were going down, I went to the front of the bus and I got on the microphone and like a tour guide and started explaining to people what we're going to be doing that evening because they had told me what we're going to do. Got to the restaurant, had a great time. I went up. I played in the mariachi band. I sang songs in Spanish. And then we went to the highlight games. And then I got sick. And then security came over, handcuffed me, and escorted me out. I mean, and then the next day, I had 5 or 6 people call me and say, one called me, 4 called Michelle. We think your husband has a drinking problem. It was kind of cute because I was funny, I thought. But, who plays in a mariachi band? I played drums. I never played the violin or any horns, and getting arrested, nearly arrested at highlight. And you get arrested in Mexico, it's not pleasant. Luckily I was with some friends that had influence. So that was just one glaring example. Weddings, bar mitzvahs, parties.
Yeah, I'm sure. Listen, we've all been there, but that's
most people, Fred, most people, in my opinion, don't go to a party already well lit up. They go to the party and they might get lit up. But I would drink because I would just feel more comfortable. I mean, I bartended, I was a disc jockey, and never contracted to do that. I just kind of wormed my way into that role at a party because I felt A, I could pour drinks for everybody. B, I get to know everybody. And C, I could leave whenever I wanted. So, but that's been so long ago. But to back to the other question, I see people, I know a lot of people still drink. They're not really friends of mine per se, but I know people have wine, they like to drink. My sister, my brother-in-law, but they generally don't. Oh no, sometimes they'll drink when I'm over there. And my brother-in-law's talk to me how nice the wine is. And I never drank wine because it took too long to get high. But anyway, back to Thad. So Thad, share a little bit about the beginning when after you went to that doctor and you took that test. And you're probably lying because I know you well enough to know you weren't 90%. You're probably 100. You probably cheated on 1 or 2 of the questions, or you didn't understand them. Because it's hard, if you and I are sitting here talking about it, I've seen that exam and I've taken it over the years to prove to people that, because some people, well, you don't act like an alcoholic. I said, well, what's an alcoholic act like when they're not drinking, Anyway, so what was it like for you? What did you do first? What happened? Did you go to treatment? Did you just go to meetings? Did you, what happened for you?
No, I did not go to treatment. I had had a big drunk on a Sunday leading up to that. My doctor appointment was Wednesday morning. That Monday night, I went to my favorite bar, had 4 beers with dinner. Next night, I went to my second favorite bar, had 3 beers with dinner, and that was the last beer I had. After I went to the doctor, he because my depression was so bad, he put me on Prozac and said, you can't drink with this. And here's a counselor to start talking to. And so he got me hooked up with a wonderful gal in the same office that I started seeing. So I went 30 days of not drinking because the medication told me to not drink. And I was seeing the counselor and my life was getting worse. The depression it was unbearable because the Prozac takes a while to kick in, is what I was told. And I didn't have the crutch of alcohol. And so my mental state got worse and worse and worse. And finally, upon the suggestion of the counselor, that she said, well, there's this thing called Smart Recovery. You could maybe try that. Or there's this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous. So I was trying to find this Smart Recovery because that sounds really cool. And fortunately, there wasn't one in Spokane because with Smart Recovery, you can still drink some, I guess. So now looking back on it, that doesn't sound like too smart of an idea. So I got desperate enough where I was willing to walk into my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting.
Yeah.
And I felt welcome there. And at the end of that meeting, they closed with the Lord's Prayer. And this meeting happened to be in the church I grew up going to. That was my grandma's church. And I said the Lord's Prayer hundreds of times in that church, and it never meant a thing to me. And talking about it right now, I'm getting chills thinking about that moment of saying the Lord's Prayer, holding hands with people I didn't even know, and it meant something. That there might be a loving God out there for me that could help me overcome this issue that I've got called alcoholism. And I started going to meetings, and within a couple months, got a sponsor. We started working the steps and had that, what they call the spiritual awakening upon doing my fifth step with my sponsor, because I believe through sharing with another person and revealing to God, who already knew, the things that I did while I was drinking and all the bad things about me and maybe some good things about me, getting that out gave me some freedom. And I went home after doing this, what we call the fifth step in Alcoholics Anonymous. I went home. We had a place up on the hillside. Nobody else was there except my dogs, and sat out and watched the sun go down. And just thought to myself, the sun has set on my drinking life. I never have to drink again. And that was freedom. And from then on, I have just kept active in the program. I take on service positions. I have sponsees that I work with here in Spokane, and it's a huge part of my life. And the biggest thing that's going on in my life right now is a willingness to grow spiritually by looking at other avenues, whether it be books, podcasts, just listening. I'm willing to do things that I wasn't willing to do before. And something that really caught my eye, Scott sent me one of his books, Tell Me No, I Dare You. And there's something that really jumped out at me, Scott, called the pinball change. And I could really relate to that. A, because I love pinball. I've got 8 old machines out in my shop. But B, because it's true. I mean, I was willing to change here, there, and everywhere, but not not within. And if you know how to play pinball, there's only two results that happen. Either you tilt or you go Drano if you're doing the pinball change. And I have, I guess, evolved into what changes that I'm willing to make in my life, the dedication I'm willing to put towards those changes in my life. I've seen huge results in the last year of my sobriety as a result of being willing to do more.
Well, that was well spoken, wasn't it? Maybe I gotta get rid of Scott and bring that onto the show.
Scott's the guy. He's the guy.
Yeah, Scott's got to stay. He's already locked into the payment plan.
Oh yeah,
Nice.
I have an ironclad contract based on what he pays me.
Yeah, it is. It is. No, but that was beautiful. That was well said. It's one thing about me being a non-believer, if you want to put it that way, and stuff. It never bothers me, and that's one thing my father and I do have in common. It doesn't bother me that he is a believer. I don't discourage him from believing. And I will give him credit that he's never discouraged me either. Although he can be a little preachy. One thing, like you mentioned going to church and stuff like that, and the Lord's Prayer and all that, and I'm familiar. I was confirmed a Catholic and all that. A lot of the AAs, at least on the East Coast, are based through the Catholic Church. And I never knew why, but I also thought it was counterproductive that they drink wine at every service. Why alcohol plays such a role in the Catholic religion? Does anybody know that answer?
I don't. I grew up in the Lutheran, and it was very similar to the Catholic.
It's the fruit of the vine, and in our faith, I mean, we get some. I can't remember the forehead and the tongue at our, either the circumcision or the baby naming. So alcohol is introduced to our people very young. The fruit of the vine. It's for lack of a better word, a way of putting it, it's God's juice. So I think that's part of it. And it's just a part of the celebration when, the fact that you're in the house of the Lord. So go figure that.
Yeah. Well, that's just how my brain works. My brain just hears these things and then starts thinking. And then there's no filter afterwards. Once it's in.
I'm the opposite. I start talking, then my brain starts working.
Well,
so I have two more questions for Thad.
Yes, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. Number one, Thad, I'd like you to share with our audience a message. What would you tell somebody who has a loved one or themselves are maybe struggling with trying to understand if they really have an issue with something mood altering, whether it's prescription medication, illicit drugs, alcohol, beer, wine? What would you tell them? What would that message look like? And what would you want to tell them, knowing what you know today?
And I'd almost point them to the doctor's opinion in the Big Book of AA. That's where I gained the most knowledge, Scott, of what the disease that I have is. I really didn't know. Even doing that paper when I was 21, it didn't really sink into me until I really read that doctor's opinion part of the Big Book. So either conveying what it says or reading it with them.
Can people find that online?
I believe so, through the apps. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right.
Yeah, there's lots of AA or alcohol-related apps.
I like to make it easy for people, because if people think they have to buy a book, they're like, well, I have a lot. I know after being an author, I have 25 books next to my bed, and I'll get to that one when I get done with the rest of them. Well, you're
who owns, Scott, you know who owns most of my books? Me.
Yeah.
In my garage.
I resemble that remark. Okay, last question, Thad. What would you like us to ask you that we haven't asked you? What would you like to be asked that we haven't asked?
We got to start telling them that question before we get to it.
No, spontaneous question.
We like the shock of it, though. We get interesting answers out of this because it doesn't even have to be alcohol related.
Anything.
It could be life related.
What's the thing that's propelled me to the most growth in the last year?
Go ahead. Explain.
I mentioned that app. So there's an app called My Spiritual Toolkit that's a AA app. And in AA, there's 12 steps. So in the 10th step, it's kind of a daily checklist of what you do, recap, kind of answer some questions on how you did. And a friend of mine in the program that goes to my home group, about 10 months ago, asked me to start doing this 10th step on this app and sharing it with him, and he would share his with me. And that has been a huge breakthrough for me because it's something that I have done. I haven't missed a night. So before I go to bed, every night I do this, and I share it with that guy, and now I share it with a couple other people, and they share theirs with me. And so it makes me accountable to myself in how my day went, whether I have fears or resentments or anything that comes up. And then it makes me deal with them sooner than letting them build and carry on for a long time. And then the other cool part of it, by sharing with another person, I get to know that other person a little bit deeper. And if something's going on pretty serious in my life or their life, I have somebody that I can talk to that knows me on a daily basis now.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a great way to connect.
It's been huge. I'm a pinball guy that bounces around. A guy that works for me calls me a butterfly because I'll be floating around all over the place. But this has gotten me to be consistent in something.
Well, and that's excellent.
By seeing the results, positive results of it, I started being more consistent and diligent in my morning devotionals as well.
Well, that's good. That's good. Okay, so Scott, you want to give your phone number out so people could hear it and call it and you could save them?
Yes, please. 619-993-2738. 619-993-2738. Call, text me, Google me, look me up, give me a call. And before you go out there and hurt yourself, if I can help, call me.
Yep. That's great. That's great. Okay. So Thad, thank you for being on today. Just hang out there for a little while we shut this down. But I want to say what I always say, right, Scott? And what is it? If nobody has told you they love you today, we love you. This is your crisis coach, Scott H. Silverman, and me, Fred Carroll. And we will see you again soon. Goodbye, everyone.